Hello, welcome to week 2. You've made it through the first week. You've got to know Canvas, and now we're really going to start getting into content. For my tip of the week, I decided to focus our discussion on what I think is the trickiest assignment for the week, which is the media analysis. So in your midweek progress, you will get to this tab, and mine might look a little different than yours, just from the instructor view, but it's going to ask you to start working on the media analysis as soon as possible. So it starts you working on that at the beginning of the week, and you submit it. It's going to jump here to week 2, give it just a second, and then you submit that actually at the end of the week, because it doesn't want to jump to week 2. There we go. You'll submit it here on January 18th or at the end of the week, depending on what your due date is for the semester. So we're going to jump to that page really quick. Here the worksheet is again. They ask you to reference the critical writing. So the worksheet looks like this. Let me just make sure this is my blank one. Here we go. The worksheet looks like this. It has 2 pages. It asks you to demonstrate your critical reading skills and practice evaluating texts and find 3 texts along the journalism continuum. Here's an illustration of the journalism continuum. I'm going to zoom in here so you can see that just a little bit better right here. So what you're going to do is pick a topic that is pretty contemporary in the news or pretty current, whether that's political or not, right? You're going to pick something that is showing up in multiple news places. So that means it's going to be popular enough in the news that you're going to be able to find 3 different articles about it. So obviously anything about the president or the royal family or any state that's a focus, anything that seems to be kind of rising to the top of the news cycle, you're going to be able to find 3 different sources. So what you're going to do is decide and maybe look at different sources from each end of this continuum and in the middle. So according to this Pew Research Center, they believe here's sort of the left and right leaning sources, and then here's our central sources. So if you look up the New York Slate, BuzzFeed, maybe an NBC News, and then a Drudge Report or Fox News, you're kind of pulling from 3 different sources. But remember, it's all on the same topic. So you're looking for an article all about the same thing. 3 different articles all about the same thing. Then you'll come down to this chart, and for each of the sources, source 1, source 2, and 3, you're going to answer the following questions. So what I'm going to do is show you a student who was successful at this, so you can kind of see what information is expected in each of these columns or rows. So here's a student from a couple semesters ago, and they are talking about President Trump and his information provided about the Biden family. So that was his topic. So he pulled his first from the Huffington Post. You can see in source 1, he has the title, the date, and the place that it was published. So you need all that information there in the first one. Then you answer the PTIC, the purpose, the topic, the issue, and the conclusion. So is the purpose to inform? Is the purpose to persuade? In his second article down here, right, he has another inform and inform. So all 3, most likely that's going to be the case if you're reading a news article, but you might get into an op-ed who's trying to persuade and might have a different purpose. But what do you think is the goal of the writer? What were they trying to accomplish? So when they're asking for purpose, are they trying to persuade? Are they just giving you information? Are they answering an opposing view, right? What are they trying to do? The topic, right, this should be the same or similar for all 3. The issue should also be the same or similar for all 3. And then the conclusion, right, that's going to be different for each of the articles that you choose, because they're going to come to a different conclusion, or at least come to a different bias or perspective on the conclusion. So this should look different for each of the articles, or at least different enough to reflect the bias or the perspective of the article. Attributed sources, this is always a little tricky for students, but if you go back to the handout, it says list any sources cited in the text, including attributed quotes. So if the author who wrote the article quotes and uses another source outside of themselves, right, that needs to be cited here. If they use any data, any logos, right, they quote studies or research, that needs to be cited here. And then if it uses sources, you want to make sure it's a credible article, so you should be able to verify them. And then you'll just underline sources that you checked and verified. So if you look here, our student, he saw that this article referenced the White House summary, which he was able to verify and click on here. It was a quote by Justice and Security Analyst Matthew Miller. He verified that was an accurate quote. And then just a couple other quotes here from Matthew Miller. So he included those there. Obviously, it's not going to look like this every time. Look at this one here. So this was just the research that the article used and that were linked at the bottom of the page. So he clicked on those links to verify that they were links to outside sources and listed them here. The same thing happened here. So your source attributed sources page box might look a little bit different depending on the content of the article. But that is, remember, going back to our instruction sheet, any sources cited in the text included attributed quotes, research, or other data. So that's what you're looking for there. Our bias is going to answer, and you'll see here examples of language from the text that reveal bias. Because you're looking at sources from this whole spectrum, you're going to have some that are leaning one way or the other. So you can see in our student example here, right? He summarized the bias or quoted some words that really represented the bias. The same thing here. It's a little bit defensive, and so he explained the bias there. And then our very last one is all you, your evaluation. When you look at evaluation, was this a reliable source? Is it a good basis for making a decision or being informed about the topic of the article? So take on an evaluative tone and decide whether or not this source was substantial enough. Was it something that really informed about the article, or did the bias get in the way? Or did it, where it landed on the continuum, did that get in the way? So that's your voice or your recommendation. I'm not expecting a huge essay here. Obviously, this student did just fine. All the boxes were answered. He had 3 strong sources from 3 different areas of the continuum and was able to speak to the bias and offer an evaluation, and that's what you're trying to do. Let me know if you have any questions.